SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Thami. Looking at your top stories, Zimbabwe says it will not cover medical bills for its people in South Africa, and the government's urged to step up and resolve global plastic crisis. Your latest news. Greetings to our listeners. Zimbabwe says it will not cover medical bills for its people in South Africa, but has stressed that basic human rights must be respected. The chairperson of the Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission, Jesse Majome, has pointed out different types of Zimbabweans in South Africa, arguing that emergency care should not be withheld based on where someone comes from. This follows South Africa's Public Protector's Office confirmation that it has no record of complaints from Zimbabwe's Human Rights Commission regarding Zimbabweans being denied health care in South Africa. The chairperson of the Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission, Jesse Majome.
I'm not aware if the South African Public Protector has received reports, and the Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission as well has not received reports. There was a conversation pertaining to this issue that had started way back then. I want to imagine that the South African Public Protector would be interested also in the reports that the service delivery is being hampered by an influx of foreign nationals. And we agreed, and my concern as the chairperson of the Zimbabwe Human Rights Commission is that as well, it is also of concern that if Zimbabwean nationals also seek services abroad, but then encounter such treatment that affronts their dignity, and the services that they receive is of mutual interest, there is beneficial interest in us engaging.
The UN's Food Agency says people trapped in the Sudanese city of Al Fashir for more than a year are facing starvation, with no sign of an end to the siege by the paramilitary Rapid Support Forces. The UN's Children's Agency today warned that malnutrition was rife in Sudan, with many children affected. The BBC's Barbara Platt-Asher.
The warning from the World Food Programme comes as local activists have already begun reporting deaths by starvation in Al Fashir. The UN agency said it hadn't been able to deliver food to the city by road for more than a year. It didn't name the party responsible, but the RSF has cut trade routes and blocked supply lines. WFP cited reports that people are eating animal fodder and food waste to try to survive. The agency said it had trucks loaded with food and nutrition assistance ready to go if it got guarantees of safe passage.
Mali's state media has reported that the Islamic State-affiliated militants released 4 Moroccan truck drivers kidnapped in January, highlighting growing intelligence cooperation between the two countries. The men and their 3 trucks disappeared in January while crossing without an escort from Dori in Burkina Faso to Terra in Niger. Junta-led Burkina Faso, Niger and Mali are battling militant groups linked to Al-Qaeda and the Islamic State that have been destabilizing West Africa's Sahel region for more than a decade. The ad hoc committee of Parliament established to investigate allegations regarding national security threats in South Africa aims to have a draft document of the terms of reference ready by the end of this week. The committee was established 2 weeks ago following allegations by the KwaZulu-Natal Police Commissioner Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi. He alleged that some of the most senior officials in the police service are involved in corruption and that Police Minister Senzo Mchunu, who has been placed on special leave, is associated with criminal syndicates. The African National Congress MP Mulapi Soviet Lekhanyane was today elected committee chairperson.
Do we agree that the terms of reference will be released on Friday? There is work that has been done by Parliament already, so it should be easy to get the terms of reference released.
Lastly, governments around the world have been urged to step up and resolve the global plastics crisis at the start of the latest UN talks in Geneva. Many of the countries present at the talks want limits on production, and some oil-producing nations disagree, seeing plastics as a key growth area. Opening the 10-day session, the chairperson, Ecuador Louis Vallas, said plastic pollution was affecting everybody.
We are facing a global crisis. Plastic pollution is damaging ecosystems, polluting our oceans and rivers, threatening biodiversity, harming human health, and unfairly impacting the most vulnerable.
Recapping on your top story, Zimbabwe says it will not cover medical bills for its people in South Africa, but has stressed that basic human rights need to be respected. Channel Africa News, I am Onele Tsinzi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
And coming up in your sports news this hour, Nigeria's national female basketball team to receive a cash reward of $100,000, while the Italian organizers have made it a point of delivering a low-cost Winter Games. Details of these and other stories coming up at 4:30.
Africa means business. Tune into Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni for the future of the African economy. Channel Africa, the African Perspective.
It is exactly 6 minutes after 4 p.m. Central African time. A very good afternoon to you, Africa, as we take a look at some of the leading stories as far as business is concerned on the African continent. We'll continue our focus on Zimbabwe, and this time it's not about issues of health, but it's about an industry that has really created, informal businesses for so many, not only in the major cities like Harare and Bulawayo, but also in the smaller areas. We're talking about the importation as well as the sale of second-hand clothing. The government has now put a ban on this. We'll find out why, as well as the possible impact that this is likely to have on the economy. Also, in our radio this afternoon, a comparative report that was commissioned by the Presidency of South Africa in collaboration with the National School of Government, titled Productivity as a Frontier in the South African Public Service. So we'll look at how the public service productivity legislation and policies in South Africa compare to those in other countries like Singapore, Rwanda and Canada. That and a whole lot more coming up for you on Africa in Business this afternoon. We are going to begin, however, with an invitation for you to join us on our various social media platforms. We'd love to hear from you, your comments on the stories that we've got in store for you, especially if you are perhaps a second-hand trader and this is the market and the industry that you are in. What do you think about this ban? How is it going to impact you on a personal level? We do know that a lot of these clothes make their way through to Zimbabwe via Mozambique and via South Africa as well. You might not be the end distributor of these clothing, but maybe you are somewhere within the value chain of this industry. How is this going to impact you? You'll find us on all the various social media platforms on X, Instagram and YouTube. You'll find us at Channel Africa 1, and on Facebook we are on Channel Africa.
Africa in Business on Channel Africa.
Now, the United States has officially imposed a 30% import tariff on South African goods, a move that could cost the country thousands of jobs and also threaten key export sectors. The tariffs, announced by the US President Donald Trump, came into effect on the 1st of August and effectively erased the benefits of the African Growth and Opportunity Act, AGOA. Future Forex Chief Executive Officer Harry Schertzer says the impact is already being felt. Here's Channel Africa's Lebohang Mabange, who has that story.
The tariffs are part of Donald Trump's reciprocal trade strategy targeting 190 countries. For South Africa, the agricultural and automotive sectors stand to lose the most, with citrus, wine and vehicle exports among those in the firing line. Harry Schertzer is the CEO of Future Forex.
So these tariffs effectively make the cost of goods more expensive to the American market. So when an American wants to buy, let's say, fruit from a South African farm, when that fruit is exported to America, there's going to be a 30% tariff that's added to the price, which means the price to clients in America will be 30% more. And suddenly the supermarkets and others will be less keen to work with South Africa because the demand is going to go down. No one wants to pay an additional 30% for a fruit.
Beyond trade volumes, the currency market is also under pressure. Schertzer warns that exchange rate volatility could hit South African businesses hard, especially those reliant on cross-border trade.
As a South African business, if you are interacting internationally, in other words, if you're an importer who's buying from abroad, if you're an exporter who's selling abroad, if you are just moving money for operations abroad, you're going to be exposed to Forex risks. And let's use importers as an example here. Let's say you import goods from America, but you sell them in South Africa in rands. If your goods are being bought in America, you're probably being priced in dollars. Or as the rand, let's say, weakens against the dollar, so in other words, you have to pay more rands for every dollar, your costs effectively increase in rand terms, and you can't necessarily increase your sales or your profits or your revenue as quickly. And so what that means is you have this risk in your business.
Regional integration under the African Continental Free Trade Area could provide some relief, but Sheza says it's not yet mature enough to serve as a full safety net.
Given our over-reliance on America, we can see what happens when the American government doesn't take favor to the South African government and how damaging that is for South Africa. And for that reason, it's really, really important that we strengthen our relationship with multiple countries, not just one, because if we, for example, do the same strategy but with China, then we just need China to turn around and say, actually, we don't like what you're doing, we're going to impose tariffs too, and we're in the same position again. So the real trick here is to form multiple bonds with multiple countries across the world to ensure that we can do more business with all of them.
His message to government is clear: act fast before the damage becomes irreversible.
My view, which is a relatively controversial one, is that the South African government at this point can't afford to have a bad relationship with America. We're way too dependent on them, and it's way too bad for our economy, and people are going to lose their jobs en masse. Factories are going to shut down within South Africa. It's just not a good solution at present. We're too dependent on America, and for that reason, I would really encourage, very, very strongly encourage our government to sit down with President Trump, sit down with the Trump regime, and sort something out to remove these tariffs ASAP.
With the tariffs now in force, the race is on to repair relations, protect jobs, and find new markets before the ripple effects hit the broader economy. Reporting for Channel Africa, I am Lebogang Mabange in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Africa in Business on Channel Africa.
Now, the government of Zimbabwe has imposed a ban on the importation and sale of second-hand clothing, as well as on street and night vending. The country's Minister of Local Government and Public Works, Daniel Garwe, informal training practices have disrupted formal businesses in the capital. In the year 2015, you will remember that Zimbabwe imposed a similar ban on the imports of second-hand clothing for resale, and they did this in effect to boost the clothing manufacturing sector within Zimbabwe. The reasons why this time, we hope, will be better illuminated by our conversation with Denford Motashu. He is the president of the Confederation of Zimbabwe Retailers. A very good afternoon to you, Daniel. Denford. Welcome to Africa in Business.
Thank you for having me. A very good afternoon to you.
So, as I said in my intro, this is not the first time that a ban has been imposed on the importation and sale or resale of second-hand clothing. The reason in 2015 was in order to boost internal manufacturing. What are the reasons now in 2025?
I think the reasons continue to look the same. Unfortunately, what happened in 2015 after the ban was a lack of implementation and enforcement, because the biggest challenge is that these clothes, second-hand clothes, are coming into the country not through the official ports of entries, but are being smuggled into the country and find their way onto the market. So one also challenge was that there wasn't serious traction on value addition and value chain integration. For example, right now, under the National Development Strategy 1 and also National Development Strategy 2, which the government and the private sector are currently working on, there is serious traction in terms of the cotton to clothing value chain and many other value chains that are actually being unraveled and already coming into fruition. And also some of the giant clothing shops had also folded, and we have seen a lot of them coming up and coming back and also doing serious local manufacturing of the similar clothes.
So we do understand that the resale of second-hand clothing in an informal sector is very buoyant and vibrant in Zimbabwe. How is this going to impact the informal sector and that business?
I think generally, if you look at many African countries, there has been a surge in the informal sector. And that high informalization has also been driven by quite a number of issues. For example, high cost of regulation and compliance have also seemed to propel informalization. Businesses trying, of course, to contain costs by evading regulation and compliance. And it is also one of the pillars that the government currently has embarked on, given the directive that has been given by the president to work on all the regulated and compliance cost reduction and elimination and streamlining, as it were. So I think currently there is a lot of traction in terms of policy shift, given that the economy is largely informalized. There has also been a decline in terms of revenue generation, fiscal revenue traction, and I think these are some of the reasons why government has had now to pursue and ensure that there is serious intent in the letter and spirit of banning second-hand clothes that are actually smuggled into the country, driving away employment creation in the formal system, driving away fiscal revenue generation through the formal channels. So I think those are some of the key areas that we have identified and actually in sync with government in terms of trying to enforce the ban at the present moment.
So the minister has said that the informal trading affects the formal businesses in Harare. Is this in the way that you've highlighted? Are those the reasons why he said what he said?
Well, I think informal trading is not only affecting formal businesses in Harare only, but I think this seems to be a growing trend in most parts of the country. Generally, if you look at the retail and wholesale sector, largely most of the businesses that are currently playing the distribution role are within the informal sector, and they have found safe haven because even sometimes most manufacturers and suppliers choose to distribute through those informal channels because they are chasing US dollars and there is ready cash in the informal sector, unlike within most of the formalized businesses. But we have seen currently the formal retailers coming up and also taking shape in terms of coming back to their feet after the challenges that they faced is in the last half of last year, and of course the better part of the first half of this year due to currency changes that affected their momentum and also their stability. But we've seen the stability in the currency and the official exchange rate. He has also seemed to propel coming back of formalized businesses, and in order to support their coming back, government is also coming through with policy interventions to ensure that because the formalized players already have infrastructure of revenue collection, and it is also in the same spirit that the government intends also to continue to collect fiscal revenue through the formalized channels while working to formalize the informal sector. So there is also serious momentum to try and formalize the informal sectors through simplification of the regulated and compliance cost centers, and also streamlining those so that at least it does not look like it's punishment for one to formalize their business.
And it's such an intricate balancing act, Denford, that the government has to play in this regard, because as you mentioned, the informal sector is also a huge contributor to the lives and even the GDP of the country, and you don't want to completely kill that, but also you don't want to disenfranchise those formal businesses who have suffered because of the informal trade. But if we look at this ban, it has also extended to night vending. How rife is night vending in Zimbabwe?
It had actually been rife, especially in the cities. where a lot of smuggled grocery items as well as those second-hand clothes were being sold during the night, and I think government has stamped its authority. It has actually been decimated in most parts of the country. Unlike 2 years ago, it was quite rife that even at 1 a.m. you would find people doing their shopping during that particular time. It also was coming in with the pricing, because in an economy like ours, you also have consumer patterns and trends shifting, and also being directed by the price of a particular commodity as opposed to the quality. And in the main, we used to see that most of the locally manufactured commodities would come out on the market more expensive than imported, general imported products, and that also has been the trend that most informal traders took advantage of, because the market has always been there. Consumers, of course, trooping to get the cheapest of the commodities that they could find on the market.
Denford, we'll leave it at that for this afternoon. Thank you very much for that update. The latest coming out of Zimbabwe regarding the ban of the importation and sale of second-hand clothing as well as nighttime trading. He's Denford Motashu, the president of the Confederation of the Zimbabwe Retailers. He takes us to exactly 22 minutes after 4.
Africa. It's time to plug into the heartbeat of the continent. Tune in to Channel Africa, your go-to radio station that broadcasts in 5 different languages.
L'Afrique du Sud célèbre la journée nationale du
Kabla hujaitwa kwa jina la Double K,
or more of our forests have been destroyed.
Tamo kutuli bwanji ndi
Partido Africano da Independência da Guiné.
See, Channel Africa represents every corner of this amazing land. From Lagos to Cape Town, Nairobi to Dakar, we've got you covered with the freshest news, music, and cultures. So, turn up the volume, feel the rhythm. Enjoy the conversation. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Connecting Africa to the world. Africa in Business with Thami Ngubeni brings you the latest insights on Africa's economy.
It is exactly 23 minutes after 4 p.m. A very good afternoon to you, Africa. Let's take a look now at a report that was commissioned by the Presidency of South Africa in collaboration with the National School of Government. And this report is titled Productivity as a Frontier in the South African Public Service. Now, this report has found that South Africa's public service productivity legislation, as well as its policies, fare rather well in comparison to countries such as Singapore, Rwanda and Canada. Now, the report further states that factors such as corruption, a lack of quality education, as well as poor skills development are indeed obstacles to the country achieving its desired productivity levels. To break this down further for us this afternoon, we're joined by Dr. Johnny Masego Peterson, the lead researcher on the Productivity as a Frontier in the South African Public Service Report at the National School of Government. Doctor, welcome to Africa in Business.
Thank you, Thami, and good afternoon.
Quite interesting, Doctor, why it is that the study was commissioned in the first place. Could you give us a little bit of background and why Canada, Singapore and Rwanda were chosen as the benchmark countries?
Well, this study, as you indicated, it was collaboration between the National School of Government and the Presidency, as well as involvement of a number of academics led by Professor Vusi Gumede. The purpose of the study was to measure public service productivity in South African context. In particular, it is more like to conceptualize it. How do we understand it? What do we understand by productivity? What do people mean when they say public service delivering or is not delivering? And we know that sometimes we could be using term like service delivery as a synonym to productivity. But then the issue was, let's have some kind of empirical evidence of what it means to be productive in the public service of South Africa. So the methodology that we applied had to include comparing ourselves with other countries, in particular Canada, Singapore and Rwanda. as people can hear, Rwanda is structurally in Africa, and Canada therefore being a Western country, and Singapore being Asian country. So it is just part of the methodology. Another part of methodology was to get the primary data from people who work in the public service themselves. A number of departments were selected, and we put them through interviews and focus groups. So therefore, it was quite a question of sort of like triangulating data that we get from those areas. So why in particular Canada? Well, we had to choose one of the countries that are in the Western sphere, and reason also being because the world classifies countries, and we are classified as a developing country, and therefore, why wouldn't you want to look for another country that probably is called a developed country?
So Doctor, perhaps let's delve into what the main findings of this study were. How do we actually compare with these three countries?
As you state that the legislature, or in terms of legislation and policy, we're doing well, that there are good intentions in our policies to ensure that public services is delivering, or public service is productive. Then it should have been part of that literature review when we're comparing and looking at our own literature itself and delving into it. So when it comes to those countries themselves and we found out that they have special strengths, and that's why they would be better than us. For example, Canada is stronger on innovation and experimentation. Performance management system of Canada is not just a tool that is used for performance management, and also to look at how the institution itself is doing. So you wouldn't have a situation like in South Africa where a person could be doing well and get a bonus performance, or performance bonus, and yet the institution itself is not doing well. So there in that case, there's a proper linkage of that. And also skilled employees. There's no mismatch. We found in a situation that chances are there's high mismatch of skills. People who are skilled quite well in some areas are working in some other areas where they're not fitting. And Singapore in particular was strong in ICT, information technology, and meritocracy is very important, that people are not appointed on cadre deployment and other things, but because they can do the job. And in the case of our African country, Rwanda, anti-corruption is an important aspect that came up, because we know that we battle with corruption, and anti-corruption is important because it makes it impossible for people not to perform. It makes it impossible for wastage of resources that could be put into ensuring that the services are delivered.
It sounds like, Doctor, that there was a lot that could be gleaned from the different countries by looking at their strong points and seeing the areas of improvement. But when you look at South Africa, as far as the report is concerned, there are a number of issues that were highlighted, some of them being corruption. There's the issue of weak implementation. There are gaps in leadership. There's, under investment in ICT as well as infrastructure. These are just some of the areas that were identified as key challenges that are dragging on South Africa's productivity. What then are the measures that the Department of Public Service and Administration are looking at implementing in order to improve in these areas?
Correct. The Department of Public Service Administration is part of the ministry that we are in. National School of Government is part of this ministry. Therefore, when we're doing a study also, we had to check with the employees in public service as to whether they know that we have a framework on productivity that they're supposed to use in their planning and in whatever they do when they conduct their work. And we found that almost all people who interviewed in the focus groups did not know that there is a framework. We're not aware of it. Therefore, first thing that DPSA has to do, Public Service Administration has to do, is to ensure that that framework is well known. At the same time, the report finds out that that framework needs to be therefore beefed up, made good to be linked properly with the proper planning. When we do our medium-term planning development and all those aspects, they should then incorporate this, what the framework also requires them to do, so that we can then define productivity in a proper way. For example, our planning wants us to achieve some outcomes. It defines some inputs when we are all planning in the year. So we would plan that we want to build 10 houses. So when we have this particular plan, the idea should be, how then would you define achieving it? How would you define productivity around it? So there are other things that need to be strengthened to ensure that there's proper collaboration. because one department could be doing well, but it needs to collaborate with others, and therefore that intergovernmental relations is missing. Because when they have to take over and do their part, it then becomes a failure of that particular service.
And we're going to unfortunately have to leave it at that this afternoon, Dr. Johnny. But I do believe you've really highlighted some of the key uptakes from this report and just the gaps that exist and the gaps that need to be plugged in for the Department of Public Service and Administration, and how you actually going to incorporate these findings into the work of the department. We thank you so much for your time this afternoon, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's Dr. Johnny Masego Peterson. He's the lead researcher on the productivity as a frontier in the South African Public Service Report at the National School of Government. The good doctor takes us to exactly 4:30 Central African time as we make our way now to the markets desk, where Buntle Hedbush is standing by with your latest market indicators.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thanks, Thami, and a very good afternoon to our listeners. In our last look at the indicators this afternoon, $1 is trading at 17 Rand 98 cents in South Africa. In Botswana, it's at 13 Pula 38. In Namibia, 17 Namibian dollars 98. And the Zambian kwacha is trading at 22 kwacha 69. In Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shilling 18. In Ethiopia at 137 per 40, Uganda 3,548 shilling, and in Tanzania it's at 2,509 shilling. $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,521 naira. In Egypt, the dollar is trading at 48 Egyptian pound 40. In Tunisia, it's at 2 dinar 90. Algeria, 129 dinar 70. In Morocco, the dollar will cost you 8 dirham 98. In Angola, it's trading at 912 kwanza, while the Congolese franc is trading at 2,870 to the US dollar this afternoon. Looking at commodities, gold is trading at $3,376, a bit higher than earlier in the afternoon, and platinum at $1,313 per ounce, while Brent crude oil is at $65.55 a barrel. And those are your indicators. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I am Buntle Hedbush.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
And for the business of sport this afternoon, a very good afternoon to you, Mosibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thank you so much, Thami. A very good afternoon from the Sports Desk. So members of the Nigeria's national female basketball team are set to receive a cash reward of $100,000 each following their victory at the FIBA Women's Afro-Basket Championship over the weekend in the Ivory Coast. So at a special reception held in honor of the team, Nigeria Vice President Kashim Shitima also promised each player a 3-bedroomed flat. Nigeria defeated Mali 78-64 on Sunday to win their 7th Afro-Basket title, which also secured them a spot at next year's FIBA World Cup. Now, members of the team, as well as the coaching and the technical crew, were also promised $50,000 each, as well as a flat during a reception that was at State House in the capital city, Abuja, on Monday. Onto this now. 6 months just before the start of the Winter Olympics, Italian organisers say that after years of ups and downs, they are now on schedule. Now, organisers have also made a point of delivering a low-cost Winter Games after recent extravaganzas. Sochi in Russia back in 2014 cost at least $40 billion, and then in South Korea in 2018, that figure came to $12 billion. The COVID-19 hit Games in Beijing back in 2022 officially cost $4 billion. But financial analysts say that including infrastructure cost, that put the total to around $38 billion. Now, the Malian Cortina estimate their final bill will be around $6 billion. Of that, $4.5 billion is going to infrastructure, and $2.5 billion will be for the staging of the games. On to football news now. RB Leipzig are yet to respond to Newcastle's offer of just under $90 million guaranteed plus add-ons for striker Benjamin Soku. Now, Manchester United are discussing internally the next steps regarding their interest in the player. Keith Downey reports.
Newcastle had made that first formal bid for Benjamin Sesko. It essentially was the £70 million that Leipzig are looking for, but it was £65 million plus £5 million in add-ons. What Leipzig said was, look, it does essentially meet their valuation, but they'd like to renegotiate the structure and the payment terms over that deal. So as a result of that, Newcastle then went back in last night with another offer, so to speak, again £70 million, but up front plus some potential add-ons as well. So we're waiting.
Right, we'll stay with football news. Everton have agreed to sign Chelsea midfielder Kieran Dewsbury Hall in a deal worth around $48 million. The fee for the 26-year-old was an initial $44 million, but a further $5.4 million due to add-ons, and he is now set to finalise the personal terms and undergo a medical despite late interest from Fulham. Now, the player had initially been reluctant to leave Stamford Bridge after a season playing in a supporting role as the side won the FIFA Club World Cup as well as the UEFA Conference League, as well as qualifying for the Champions League next season. However, the Blues were also open to letting the midfielder go as they look to recoup a vast majority of the $50 million it took to prize him from Leicester City back in 2014, where he rejoined Enzo Maresca's side, who also left the Foxes to manage Chelsea. And finally, Sutherland head coach Regis Lebres was rewarded with a new long-term contract until 2028 on Monday, this after leading the club to the Premier League promotion. The 49-year-old Frenchman was appointed in June of 2024, this after leaving Lorient, and led the Black Cats back into top-flight football. Meanwhile, the club have also signed 8 players over the European summer, including former Arsenal as well as Bayer Leverkusen midfielder Khanet Xhaka. It's 16:38 p.m. Central African Time. That concludes your sports news this hour. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, simply send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or give us a call. The newsroom line is +27 11714 4459. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Mosibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Stay ahead with Africa in Business, where Thami Ngubeni unpacks your go-to source for Africa's economic trends and development.
It is exactly 4:38 Central African Time. Really keen to hear from you this afternoon as we focus on business on the African continent, and more specifically, if you are a small business owner. Some information coming out of the Small Business Growth Index this afternoon that was released by ABSA shows that a lot of businesses, and a majority of businesses, are in need of some urgent financial intervention. If you are a small business, share with us what your experiences are. Are you feeling the pinch a little bit more than usual this time around? Has there been a slowdown in the economy? What are the challenges that you are facing? In just a moment, we'll be having a conversation with the managing executive for SME business at ABSA Business Banking, who's going to be breaking down the outcomes of the Small Business Growth Index. But I'd love to hear from you this afternoon. What have been your experiences on the ground? Are you feeling that financial pinch? Are you feeling like you literally have a very short string? And by the time 2026 comes about, if you don't get that much needed financial injection, you might just need to close your doors. If that's you, let us know. You'll find us on X, Instagram and YouTube at Channel Africa 1, and on Facebook we are at Channel Africa. Maybe you can also share some of your survival tips. Those also coming in very handy. It's now 4:40.
Africa in Business on Channel Africa.
So it is an area of discussion. It is the Small Business Growth Index that was released by ABSA the South African Chamber of Commerce and Industry and the Bureau of Market Research. Now, this has shown that South Africa's small business ecosystem is under extreme pressure, this as business owners try to stay open. Now, the index has found that without immediate financial support, half of the small enterprises that are currently operational may not survive until 2026. That's a startling outcome. And what this does, it highlights the urgent need for targeted and systemic support from both the public and the private sectors. For more on this, we joined this afternoon by Ronnie Mbatsane, the Managing Executive for SME Business at Absa Business Banking. A very good afternoon to you, Ronnie. Not the bearer of good news, I see, this afternoon. Welcome.
No, thanks. A very good afternoon, Thami, to you and your viewers, and thank you for having us. Not really good news, but something that we can actually build on, because I think the study is an accurate reflection of where our small, medium enterprises find themselves in the economy in today's environment.
Perhaps let's start off by putting all of this into perspective. Tell us more about the Small Business Growth Index and what exactly it sets out to measure.
No, thanks, Thami. I think the small enterprise account for almost 90% of all businesses in the country. And, for many years, they've lacked a consistent or even a real-time, parameter that access and giving them, real information with regards to the conditions, the challenges, and even possibly growth, prospects. So we partnered with the South African Chamber of Business, as well as the Bureau of Market Research, driven by just a shared need that we have to go just beyond, the evidence and understand the lived experiences and challenges, as well as aspirations in some of South African entrepreneurs and SMMEs. So that's where the Small Business Growth Index was actually conceived, to make sure that we have, a voice that allow us to have insights that inform not only us as a bank, as Absa, but also the broader ecosystem in terms of intervention and policy.
And when you talk about these insights, Ronnie, one of these insights is the vulnerable state of South Africa's SMEs. How are SMEs in South Africa exposed?
Are very much exposed. I think, when things happen in the economy, most of the SMMEs, because of the, sheer size of the balance sheet, they can't really stomach some of the turmoils that we are seeing. And the data shows the sector really under strain. More than half of the business surveyed reported being in a decline, distress, or even in a risk of closing. And 50% said they may not even survive beyond the 12 months. And we're seeing really alarming indicators of pressure with small businesses that are facing primarily the input cost, things like transport, utilities, and some of the raw materials. So those are some of the things that are coming directly on the index itself.
And you mentioned now one of the startling outcomes of this index, that by 2026, more than half or around half of South Africa's small and medium enterprises might not actually even be operational. What would be the driving factors behind these closures?
The data reveals really a very challenging environment, especially when you look at input cost. Most of these small businesses really struggle to even commit on long-term sustainability, even taking a risk of a long-term view with regards to long-term assets that normally yields returns over time. What we have seen is that they work primarily on a working capital, which is normally 12 months, just to survive the 12 months. So this data really, is really showing us a need to fast track just beyond just lending to be able to sustain, this industry in a right way. I think as long as, despite the strain, we're seeing that 80% of the businesses still signal the intent to invest, which is very positive. especially in marketing as well as working capital, reflection a very cautious but determined outlook. And that's where a bank like ourselves need to come in, very handy.
And what would you highlight perhaps as some of the targeted and systemic supports that are needed to avert this crisis?
No, I think, Thami, I'm happy that, a bank like ourselves and some of the ecosystem players in the industry have started to look at alternative, ways of helping small businesses. There's a lot of blended finance, a lot of credit guarantees, specifically to the likes of small business, department that we have, and the working relationship we have seen when we work together. We are able to mitigate majority of the risk, to manage most of the business in business and be able to sustain them over time. We also saw the extension of the non-financial support which we give, and there's a lot of players that do that with regards to skills, development, and also financial literacy in this space. And those are some of the findings in the index out of the 8 index findings that we find on the index, that those are the biggest needs in terms of access to capital, alternative types of lending, access to market, and that much needed non-financial support for them to be able to navigate and sustain themselves in this period.
They do say that knowledge is power, and once you have those tools, you are better enabled to use them. Thank you so much for your insight and just breaking down that report. And I guess the glimmer of hope at the end, right? That it's not all doom and gloom. Yes, this is what the research says, but there are various stakeholders that are there to hold the hands of SMEs and ensure that they do not end up being part of those who get chopped off come 2026.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for us, it's an exciting period. This is the first time we have a barometer that looks like this. We will be doing it, biannually. We will have another one towards the end of November. But we are giving this as a gift to the industry so that we can look at the small business, in detail, as I've indicated earlier. They are contributing a lot in terms of employment in the country. And I think it's important that we understand exactly what they go through so that we can come up with much needed, tools collectively in the industry. And I think as a bank that looks after the entrepreneurs, we are really excited that we'll be able to use these tools to change how we actually treat most of our small, medium enterprise. So this is exciting.
Ronnie Mbatsane, it's been a pleasure. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's Ronnie Mbatsane. He is the Managing Executive for SME Business at Absa Business Banking. He takes us to exactly 4:48.
Gender-based violence is destroying lives and tearing communities apart. It happens in homes, in schools, at workplaces, and too often in silence. But it doesn't have to continue. If you see it, speak out. If you are hurting, reach out. Because doing nothing is not an option. Listen to all 19 SABC radio stations from Wednesday, 23rd of July for hard talk, discussions, advice, dramas, educational shows, and interviews around GBV with experts, survivors, lawmakers, and the whole country affected by gender-based violence. For all your favorite SABC radio stations, call 0800 428 428 to report abuse or get help. GBV, it ends with you. This message is brought to you by the SABC. Africa in Business. Africa in Business delivers key insights and real-time updates on Africa's growing markets with Thami Ngubeni. The African Perspective on Channel Africa.
Channel Africa.
Now, Standard Bank, in partnership with South Africa's Ministry of Women, Youth and Persons with Disabilities, the Department of Sport, Arts and Culture, as well as the Gauteng Provincial Government, last Friday hosted the Women in Trade Intervention Dialogue. The dialogue sought to address critical issues around women's economic participation and financial inclusion. This as the country commemorates Women's Month and focuses on sustainable economic recovery. For more on this, Naledzani Mosomane, Head of Enterprise and Supply Development, Business and Commercial Banking at Standard Bank South Africa, joins us on the line. A very good afternoon to you and happy Women's Month.
Hi, good afternoon, Thami, and good afternoon to all your listeners. Happy Women's Month to you too.
It's great that it's not just about, commemorating the struggles and the successes of the past, but also about how to better capacitate the women of today for their futures. Tell us more about this dialogue that took place and why it was important to have a dialogue of this nature.
Thanks, Thami. So I think it's important to have dialogues of this nature because it creates an opportunity and a space for women-owned enterprises to come together and network and connect and understand the challenges and some of the barriers that they're facing and how to overcome these barriers. The dialogue that was held last week, Friday, was the first of its kind. It was through the Department of Women, Youth and Persons with Disabilities. And they really wanted to create a platform where corporates could come through, where financial institutions could also come through, and as well as where SMEs, female-owned SMEs could come through and just network and understand the opportunities that are available to them from a funding perspective as well as from a access to resources perspective.
I'm glad you brought that up, Naledzani, because in today's fast-changing financial landscape, the question begs, are traditional banks, such as Standard Bank, such as yourselves, still the best place for female entrepreneurs to go when seeking funding? When we speak about barriers to entry, a lot of the time, it's the regular established financial institutions that get their finger pointed at.
So I would say yes. And, when I speak from a Standard Bank perspective, the team that deals with funding for businesses is female-led, right? So our head of business and commercial banking, Simone Cooper, is a female. Her executive team is a female. I look after ESD. I'm a female, and majority of my team is also female. So I think when you start being deliberate and intentional about solutioning for SMEs, understanding the challenges that they face, understanding some of the barriers that they face, understanding what are those potential interventions that we believe can support them. It is coming from a balanced view where you have a team of women solutioning for women because we understand these struggles. And ultimately our aim as a business and commercial banking team is to create access and is to open up those channels for these female SMEs to gain access to funding and access to support so that their businesses can be successful and sustainable.
And in order for these businesses, especially female-owned businesses, how should women entrepreneurs prepare themselves before walking into a bank or any financial institution to apply for funding? Are there some common pitfalls that you have observed while dealing with female entrepreneurs?
Yeah, I think it's important to understand your business. You need to understand, as an entrepreneur in general, right? You need to understand where is your market? Who are you selling to? What are you selling? What are the potential opportunities for your business? And when you come to the bank looking for funding, you need to be very clear in terms of what do you need that funding for. I think another thing that is also very important, which many entrepreneurs in general forget, is that when the bank looks at you, particularly from an access to funding perspective, we look at you holistically, right? So you need to be in good standing in your personal as an individual as well as a business as well. So the minute we start doing the credit checking and the monitoring, where we find that you have arrears or overdues in your personal account, it does have a big impact on your ability to get access to funding for your business. So that holistic view is important.
And talking about that, that is standard practice. It's what one would expect as far as vetting, and due diligence is concerned. But are these not perhaps some of the reasons why some entrepreneurs worry that banks are more conservative, that you're just such hard nuts to crack? Is that a fair perception, do you think? Or is it more about finding the right product for the right business stage or for the right entrepreneur, depending on what their own personal circumstances are?
It is about finding the right product, but it's also about understanding your ecosystem, right? So when we start talking about funding avenues, banks are one channel. Yes, we are, we would say traditional in that we're very clear in terms of what we expect from an SME to fund. But there are other avenues. You have DFIs, you have angel investors. There's an entire entrepreneurial ecosystem that focuses on funding businesses, and there is money out there. The problem that we see is that there's a lack of understanding in terms of what are those avenues for me as a business. I look after enterprise and supply development. We are particularly ring-fenced in supporting businesses that are at a minimum 51% Black-owned, with a big focus on supporting female-owned SMEs as well. And you might find that there are some SMEs that don't even know, that there are ESD programs for them that are available out there. So that lack of knowledge is a key challenge that we find. But we do find that it's important to continue to partner with your government institutions, with your other corporates that are funding SMEs or that are working with SMEs, just so that our reach and just so that there's a awareness of the products and solutions that are available for SMEs.
That's a really good assignment for all women entrepreneurs in this month of August. Do your homework, find out what's available. Only then are you able to make use of the various avenues that are there for you. We'll have to leave it at that this afternoon. Naledzani, thank you so much, and wishing you all the best for this month as you continue empowering women in business.
Thank you, Thami. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That's Naledzani Mosomane. She is Head of Enterprise and Supply Development, Business and Commercial Banking at Standard Bank, South Africa. It's gone exactly 4:57 right here on Channel Africa. And as African business makes way to Vous d'Afrique, we say bonjour and welcome back.
Merci. Bonjour Thami. Bonjour à tous les auditeurs. Alors, tout à l'heure sur Vue d'Afrique, il sera question de la poursuite des combats à l'est de la RDC, malgré que Kinshasa et Kigali ont paraphé vendredi à Washington le texte des principes du cadre d'intégration économique régionale. Nous parlerons des États-Unis qui annoncent suspendre temporairement la délivrance des visas aux Burundais, mais aussi du Burkina Faso. Ibrahim Traoré appelle à l'unité et à la souveraineté. Merci Thami.
Merci Joël. The two Joëls coming up on Vue d'Afrique. From myself, Thami Ngubeni, and our entire team here at Africa in Business, our producer Mabubu Loka, technical producer Nanda Koza, social media Sfiso Hlope, on the news desk Onele Nzinzi, economics desk Butle Headbush, and on sport Musibudi Makura. Until tomorrow, you have yourself a splendid day further. Have a great one. Goodbye.
africaine en langue française. Nanda assure la mise en onde de cette édition d'information et je suis Joël Mouteba à la présentation. Tout de suite, voici les grands titres qui font l'actualité de ce jour. Poursuite des combats à l'est de la RDC, malgré que Kinshasa et Kigali ont paraphé vendredi à Washington le texte des principes du cadre d'intégration économique régionale. Les États-Unis annoncent suspendre temporairement la délivrance de visas aux Burundais, invoquant des violations répétées des règles migratoires. Et enfin, pour les grands titres de ce soir, nous nous rendrons au Burkina Faso. Ibrahim Traoré appelle à l'unité et à la souveraineté lors de la célébration du 65e anniversaire de l'indépendance du pays. Ce sont là quelques-uns de grands titres qui seront développés après le bulletin d'information de Joël Kabongo. Bonjour Kabongo.
Bonjour Joël.
SABC, actualité. La perspective africaine.
Bonjour à toutes et à tous, bienvenue à cette nouvelle édition qui s'ouvre en Afrique du Sud. Les familles et survivants des violations flagrantes des droits de l'homme commises pendant l'apartheid s'opposent fermement à la demande du gouvernement visant à retarder leur action en dommage intérêt constitutionnel. L'État sud-africain devrait s'adresser aux tribunaux pour tenter d'obtenir un report ou une suspension de la demande principale en attendant les résultats d'une commission d'enquête judiciaire. L'affaire déposée par 25 familles et survivants de crimes de l'époque de l'apartheid le 20 janvier dernier vise à faire déclarer illégale et en violation de droits humains des récurrents la conduite du gouvernement sud-africain consistant à entraver l'enquête dans cette affaire. Les familles soutiennent que la commission d'enquête mise en place par le président en mai dernier n'a pas l'autorité nécessaire pour statuer sur les violations des droits et ne peut faire que des recommandations au président de la République. Au Bénin, l'organe en charge de l'organisation des élections a officiellement présenté lundi le calendrier électoral impliquant 3 scrutins, à savoir législatives, présidentielles et communales. Le dépôt des candidatures pour l'élection présidentielle devra être bouclé au plus tard le 11 octobre 2025.
Le 11 janvier 2026, les électeurs se rendront aux urnes pour un double scrutin législatif et communal. Le 12 avril 2026 marquera le premier tour de l'élection présidentielle. D'après ce calendrier, si aucun des candidats n'obtient la majorité absolue, le second tour se tiendra le 10 mai 2026. La prestation de serment du président élu est, quant à elle, fixée au 24 mai 2026. À noter que si le gouvernement mise sur des scrutins apaisés, transparents et inclusifs, l'opposition, elle, reste préoccupée par les règles du jeu. En ligne de mire, le seuil des 20% à atteindre dans chacune des 24 circonscriptions, condition sine qua non pour obtenir un siège parlementaire.
En Somalie, au moins 70 membres du groupe terroriste Al-Shabaab ont été tués lors d'opérations militaires menées par l'armée avec le soutien des forces de maintien de la paix de l'Union africaine dans la région du Bas-Shabelle. Selon le ministère somalien de la Défense, 2 soldats de l'armée nationale ont été tués et 12 autres blessés lors de ces affrontements. Le ministère a précisé que l'opération a visé des bases stratégiques dans la ville de Bariré en perçant les lignes de défense des terroristes. Cette annonce intervient quelques jours après que l'armée ait rapporté la mort de plus de 50 combattants d'Al-Shabaab lors d'une précédente opération conjointe dans la même zone. Pour rappel, Al-Shabaab mène depuis plus de 16 ans une insurrection contre le gouvernement somalien visant régulièrement les forces de sécurité, les responsables du gouvernement et les civils. C'est ce jeudi 7 août que le traditionnel défilé militaire organisé à l'occasion du 65e anniversaire de l'indépendance de la Côte d'Ivoire aura lieu à Bouaké. Le chef d'état-major général des armées ivoiriennes, Lassine Ndoumbia, qui a fait cette annonce, a précisé que le militaire français, américain et marocain prendront part à ce défilé.
Il a précisé que ce défilé rassemblera plus de 4000 militaires et plus de 500 matériels et engins mobilisés pour la célébration. Le Maroc sera représenté par environ une centaine de militaires, la France par une cinquantaine, tandis que les États-Unis participeront avec leur drapeau et une garde. Selon l'état-major, cette présence étrangère vise à magnifier et consolider la qualité de la coopération militaire entre ces nations et la Côte d'Ivoire. Il a par ailleurs indiqué que l'Afrique du Sud et le Nigeria, invités également, ne pourront pas être présents pour des raisons opérationnelles et de calendrier.
Et dans un message à la nation prononcé à l'occasion du 65e anniversaire de l'indépendance du Burkina Faso, célébré ce mardi 5 août, le président de la transition, Ibrahim Traoré, a exhorté les citoyens à renforcer leur attachement à l'histoire, à la souveraineté et à l'unité nationale. Ibrahim Traoré a salué la lutte des anciens pour l'émancipation du pays, appelant à l'édification collective d'un avenir meilleur. Il a notamment cité la reconquête de la vallée du Sourou, la stabilisation des Diapaga et des Djibo, le redémarrage de la mine de Bungu, le ravitaillement régulier de plusieurs localités de l'Est et le retour progressif de l'administration dans des zones jadis inaccessibles. Le président du Faso a par ailleurs salué la mobilisation des forces de défense engagées dans la reconquête, la sécurisation et la stabilisation du pays. Fin de cette page d'actualité. Merci de l'avoir suivi.
SABC Actualité. La perspective africaine.
Bienvenue dans la grande actualité de Vue d'Afrique. Je suis Joël Mouteba et vous êtes au www.channelafrica.co.za. Merci de rester connecté également sur nos chaînes Facebook et YouTube en direct, en images, mais également un clin d'œil à ceux qui nous suivent sur DSTV 802, OpenView 628 et aussi à partir de l'application SABC+. L'université de Witwatersrand de Johannesburg en Afrique du Sud a accueilli ce vendredi le symposium annuel sur la créativité dans l'industrie du cinéma. Centré autour du thème « Explorer les opportunités dans l'industrie cinématographique sud-africain », la rencontre était organisée par Act and Forth Production en collaboration avec le département de cinéma et télévision de Wit. Les discussions ont tourné autour des sujets importants en lien avec le secteur, tels que les relations entre diffuseurs et producteurs, les droits d'auteur, la pertinence des contenus, l'entrepreneuriat dans l'industrie ou encore les innovations technologiques. Les détails dans ce reportage.
La salle de cinéma du département de films et télévision de l'université de Witwatersrand à Johannesburg était vendredi 1er juillet 2025 le théâtre de la prestigieuse rencontre annuelle, le symposium sur la créativité dans le secteur du cinéma sud-africain. L'événement, qui a débuté à 13h juste, comprenait un panel de 6 intervenants, tous professionnels du secteur du cinéma et de la télévision d'Afrique du Sud, sélectionnés minutieusement par les organisateurs, se basant sur leurs expériences, talents et savoir-faire dans leur domaine de prédilection. Il s'agit entre autres de l'acteur Jerry Mofokeng Wamaketa, ancien étudiant de l'université de Wit, écrivain et récipiendaire du prix le Director and Lifetime Achievement Award, de l'actrice, réalisatrice, productrice et autrice Mabato Moncho, de la réalisatrice et productrice Sarah Blecher, ainsi que de la styliste de mode et couturière Moipone Kubedi. À tour de rôle, les intervenants sont revenus en long et en large sur leur début dans l'industrie, leurs expériences positives, les challenges qui sont énormes dans le secteur ou encore les multiples opportunités existantes mais encore inexploitées dans le domaine du cinéma et de la télévision dans le pays. La rencontre a attiré une centaine d'étudiants. Curieuse et désireuse d'apprendre un peu plus sur l'univers du cinéma et de la télévision, l'assistance a posé toutes sortes de questions, notamment comment intégrer les nouvelles technologies numériques dans les créations des projets de films, comment développer une histoire pour un film documentaire ou encore comment créer du contenu, ici pour les films de fiction, qui est pertinent pour une audience africaine, c'est-à-dire qui reflète les réalités africaines en respectant les mœurs et cultures du continent, mais qui en même temps peut susciter l'intérêt des diffuseurs indépendants tels que Netflix ou d'autres. L'objectif du symposium qui se déroule annuellement depuis quelques années est clair. Aider les étudiants à s'imprégner déjà des aspects de l'univers cinématographique professionnel qui les attend une fois sortis de l'université. Les discussions et les échanges autour des questions importantes du domaine ainsi que le réseautage avec les experts et professionnels du secteur visent, selon les organisateurs, à les préparer à ce métier passionnant et excitant. Moke Jansen van Veren, vice-président du département de cinéma et de la télévision à l'université de Wit, l'un des organisateurs. L'objectif est donc de réunir certains des grands praticiens de notre industrie dans un cadre assez informel. Ça s'appelle symposium, mais comme vous avez vu à l'intérieur, les discussions sont assez informelles. C'est plus une conversation et pour eux de se connecter avec les étudiants et les jeunes qui sont intéressés à faire partie de cette industrie du cinéma et de la télévision. Et je veux dire, nous disons l'industrie, mais il n'y a pas une seule grande industrie dans ce pays. Et comme beaucoup de praticiens qui ont parlé aujourd'hui, l'industrie est souvent ce que vous en faites, et en particulier dans notre climat actuel. Il convient de noter que l'industrie cinématographique sud-africaine connaît une croissance fulgurante et attire des productions locales et internationales soutenues par des mesures incitatives gouvernementales ainsi qu'un vivier croissant des professionnels qualifiés. Le secteur contribue significativement à l'économie du pays. Il devrait générer 5,2 milliards de rand en 2025. Annika Longi pour Channel Africa Actualité.
Você é fluente em português? É apaixonado por rádio e quer trabalhar na África do Sul? Você tem documentos que o qualificam para trabalhar na África do Sul? Nesse caso, podemos ter uma oportunidade para você trabalhar no Canal África. Envie seu currículo e demonstração para Canal África at newsroom@channelafrica.co.za. Lembre-se, se você não receber alguma resposta nossa em 14 dias, isso significa que você não foi selecionado. Canal África, a perspective africaine.
Des reportages en soirée qui relient l'Afrique au monde. Vue d'Afrique avec Joël Mouteba en semaine de 17h à 18h sur Channel Africa.
Je l'ai annoncé en grand titre, la RDC et le Rwanda ont franchi une nouvelle étape dans la mise en œuvre de l'accord de paix en paragraphant ce vendredi 1er août 2025 à Washington le texte des principes du cadre d'intégration économique régionale, CER. Ce document exigé par l'accord de paix soutenu par les États-Unis jette les bases d'une coopération économique renforcée entre la RDC et le Rwanda dans plusieurs secteurs stratégiques. La signature de ce texte constitue une avancée significative dans la normalisation des relations bilatérales dans un contexte toujours tendu sur le plan sécuritaire à l'est de la RDC. Et pour en parler, nous sommes en ligne avec l'analyste politique Teddy Mfitou. Bienvenue sur Vue d'Afrique et bonjour Monsieur Mfitou.
Bonjour Madame.
Monsieur Mfitou, est-ce que ce texte veut dire fin de la rivalité sécuritaire et bonjour à une coopération économique véritable entre la RDC et le Rwanda ?
Des comportements, notamment au moment de la CPG, des textes économiques qui a permis à ce que le peuple rwandais, le peuple congolais, mais aussi le peuple ougandais et burundais puissent travailler ensemble. C'est le régime du Front patriotique rwandais qui a ramené la violence, la guerre, des visées expansionnistes, mais avant, il n'y a jamais eu de problème. Donc c'est un texte qui revient sur les relations normales qui devraient exister entre les deux États.
Alors, aucun projet n'a encore vu le jour et les conflits armés persistent sur le terrain. Les victimes attendent toujours vérité, justice et réparation. Cependant, Washington parle déjà des progrès économiques et d'amélioration de la vie des communautés grâce à cette coopération. Ma question est celle-ci, n'est-ce pas un peu prématuré de se réjouir déjà ?
Chacun essaye de communiquer en fonction de ses intérêts et de la politique intérieure. Donald Trump a besoin de victoires diplomatiques pour se départir de l'image des démocrates, Obama et Biden, qui ont eu, pendant leur mandat, à mener des opérations militaires, à faire la guerre. Donc lui, il cherche par tous les moyens à se donner l'image d'un président qui pense business, qui essaye de mettre fin à la guerre. La même chose qu'il a réalisé entre la Russie et l'Ukraine au début de son mandat. Il essaye de les reproduire en RDC en suscitant une paix qui profiterait bien évidemment aux entreprises américaines, mais aussi à la sous-région. C'est aux Congolais, au gouvernement congolais de pouvoir orienter les choses dans le sens que le peuple congolais doit retrouver la paix et la prospérité qu'il mérite.
Mais que répondez-vous à ceux qui estiment que la RDC a plus perdu que gagné en se tournant vers les États-Unis dans ce processus. Selon eux, cet accord oblige le pays à faire la paix avec un ennemi désigné et même à coopérer malgré les atrocités commises contre sa population et à tourner la page sans justice ni réparation. Ont-ils raison de penser que la RDC aurait pu choisir une autre voie plus juste, plus digne?
Si cette voie existait, on l'aurait déjà prise. Et ceux qui disent cela doivent nous expliquer la paix, on l'a fait avec qui, si ce ne sont qu'avec des ennemis. Je n'ai jamais vu des gens faire la paix avec autre personne que des ennemis d'hier. Donc nous sommes des peuples qui vivent ensemble. Il ne faut pas confondre le peuple rwandais qui est un peuple frère au gouvernement rwandais actuel mené par le Front patriotique rwandais dont Paul Kagame est le représentant de ce qu'on appelle l'empire Imatutsi. Ça n'a rien à voir avec le peuple rwandais. Nous n'allons pas délocaliser tous les Rwandais au motif qu'ils nous ont fait la guerre à un moment donné. Mais cela ne veut pas dire que nous allons oublier. La justice doit passer et nous nous assurerons pour que les générations futures n'oublient jamais ce qui s'est passé entre nos deux peuples. Mais la voie, la seule, unique, et d'ailleurs la plus importante, c'est la paix. Parce que la paix préserve des vies. Ceux qui disent qu'on aurait pu avoir une autre voie, ce sont des politiques qui pensent à leurs intérêts, à leur accession au pouvoir, et ils poussent de manière très macabre. Mais pour le peuple congolais, une paix retrouvée aujourd'hui, ce sont des vies qui sont préservées, des vies qui sont gagnées.
Et dans cet accord censé promouvoir une coopération gagnant-gagnant, quels sont les risques ou plutôt les concessions majeures que la RDC pourrait être amenée à faire? En clair, qu'est-ce que la RDC risque de perdre dans cette intégration économique avec le Rwanda?
C'est sur le plan diplomatique et sur le plan de l'image. C'est comme si la RDC n'a pas réussi à gagner son bras de fer contre les Rwandais et a été obligée d'accepter une paix des braves imposée par les Américains. Mais en gros, la RDC ne perd rien parce que nous sommes un grand peuple et en tant qu'un peuple souverain, on a la possibilité, même des années plus tard, à pouvoir faire valoir nos intérêts. Les problèmes